morning, everyone. This is Nicole Testa Boston with Fiatech, and we're glad that you could all join us this morning. We're going to be talking to Atlas RFID. They're a Fiatech member, about lessons learned and best practices defined for deploying barcoding, RFID, and GPS to mobilize site materials management processes on EPC projects. Before we get started and I introduce our speaker today, I just want to remind everyone that you are on a defaulted mute setting. We do, however, encourage questions and input and feedback, so please use the questions tab on the GoToMeeting toolbar. That is unique to you. You can open that up, type those questions in. Those will go directly to me, and as time permits during the hour, I will field those to John. If we do run out of time and we don't get to your question, John will follow up with you following the presentation. We also will be recording the presentation, both the audio and the slides, and posting those on the fiatech.org website. Give us a few days to get those up, but we will have that recording as well that you can share with colleagues and review yourself. Lastly, that toolbar is unique to use, so you can move it around, and you can use that orange arrow button at the top to minimize it and remove it from your screen to give you an unobstructed view of the presentation. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce John Chesser. He's the Vice President of Construction Solutions at Atlas RFID. He has more than a dozen years of experience as a product manager, business process consultant, and a project manager. He's responsible for ensuring Atlas's RFID-based materials management solution job site visibility extension, or Jovix, continues to eliminate or reduce the use of manual, paper-based inventory control and preventive maintenance processes for the E&C market. Jovix has been adopted at the enterprise level by 4 of the top 10 EPC firms in the U.S., and it's been deployed in 6 different countries on 4 different continents. Mr. Chesser holds a BA in marketing from Auburn University and an MBA from the University of Alabama in Birmingham. And with that, I want to thank you very much, John, for taking the time today to talk to all of us and share your story with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. We wanted to first start off with topics of discussion. I know one of the things we'll talk about in the beginning, or what, kind of get everybody on the same page with what we here at Atlas see is the status quo today for the EPC industry, specifically with materials management. Talk about deployment planning based on the best practices, based on how we have deployed barcode, RFID, GPS, all with mobile devices on many of these large EPC projects, and what are some of the best practices out there, what's worked, what maybe hasn't worked, and things to think about when you get into actually deployment. And then very briefly at the end, we'll talk a little bit about us, who we are, and our deployment methodology that we go about. So from an EPC materials management, there are various processes that are involved, specifically with the material. I mean, this is all the things that are being built are very unique. There, engineering that has to occur, and then from that engineering, there's procurement of those items. And from the procurement, there is a supplier that's either going to supply that, or it's got to be fabricated and detailed. But all that goes into some shipping from logistics to the time that it gets to what we call site materials management. This is everything at the site. So this is receiving it. This is storing the material. That material has to be requested. Once it's requested, it has to be located by the warehouse crew, lay down yard, and then it's got to be issued to construction, where then it will be installed, inspected, and eventually turned over. So these are some of the processes that we're going to talk about, some of the things that we see. Specifically with receiving this material, one of the questions is why is barcode, why has it been adopted so much in the retail industry and in the automotive manufacturing industry and these other industries that are out there? And one of the reasons is there's a lot of different reasons for that. One of the reasons, though, is that when you get into receiving of this material out there, you've got material coming from a lot of different suppliers from all over the place, and it's not a supplier that you may have dealt with in the past, or it may be a supplier that you've dealt with in the past, but that exchange of data is not there necessarily like it is in these other industries. It hasn't been standardized. And so what does that mean? So what that ends up happening is you have a receiving crew that's very, in many cases, unaware of the material that's coming. Someone may have got an advance shipping notice if they're lucky. That could have come 48 hours ahead of time. It could have come 24 hours. It could have come after the actual truck shows up with the material. So what does that mean? That you've got a crew out there that has got a truck that shows up, and they've got to manually record. So what do they have to record against? They record against the packing list. And they mark that receipt, and then typically they'll hand that off to a data entry clerk who's going to go key that back into a system. There are errors that can be associated with that, and there are ways that can be streamlined through some of these best practices we'll talk about. The other thing you get into is actual storing of material. So, many of these sites that where this material is being stored are large and complex. You may have multiple different laydown yards. You may have control over the laydown yard. You may not have control over the laydown yard. And so you've got a lot of different things that can be moving around in these various different locations. So it's not, again, back to the retail or automotive manufacturing, you don't have a assembly line. You don't have a trucks that show up in a min and a max and all those good, nice things. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to implement some of these just standard barcode and receiving processes. Not to mention that we do have large outdoor storage areas, and we're using paper to keep up with that and the actual signs that are out there. So what does that lead to? As far as the efficiency, it leads to, again, so this could be at the point of receipt, or it could be a delayed put away. Maybe you receive a truck and then you've got to go store everything once you shake it out, or same thing in the warehouse. Maybe you store that later in a warehouse. Typically what we see a lot up there today is that that's being done with paper. That paper is then handed back to the data entry clerk, again, who goes and records that. Now, if you get into some issues where you have dynamic storage areas, so what I mean by dynamic storage areas is maybe you put some of your structural steel in this area, maybe you put some of your pipe spools in this area, wherever it may be, and you have to actually reuse that area. Or maybe your schedule isn't going exactly as planned, and you were hoping to have some of that material that's in the laydown yard stored actually out of there by this time, and because the schedule's delayed, you can't do that. So there's things that change out there where you're going to have to store this material that make it unique to this industry, that make it somewhat difficult to keep up with, especially with paper. When you get into the request side of the equation, many times that's done with paper, and there are, the issues and errors associated with the paper, much less the visibility that people have when they're actually trying to do that. So, what does that lead to? If a requester completes the paper form, he or she may lack information about that material. Is the material on site? Has it been inspected? Maybe it's quarantined, maybe it's on hold, maybe it was damaged when it was received. All that's very difficult to see when you have this paper-based process where things are handwritten and put down, maybe keyed into a system later. So, again, it just comes down to the communication between the requester, the warehouse, and construction, and making sure that they can all be on the same page. So these are some of the, again, what we see with status quo, some of the issues that are out there. When you're going to locate the items, to pick the items, there are literally thousands of items that are out there that all look very similar to one another, but they're very specific, they're very unique. This one needs to be picked. In many cases, something could have happened to the handwritten thing that's on there, the actual piece mark number. There's a lot of numbers there in this example. And from there, if you pick the wrong one, you take it to construction. That's going to create issues there because now you've got material that's been delivered to construction, and if it's not the right one, they're going to set that over to the side, or they may take it back to the laydown yard. But whatever they do, typically it's not re-recorded, the location that they take it to. And then just the smaller items, in some cases, present the biggest problems. When you've got thousands of these items and they're very unique, you've got to find the small one. looking for something that is paper and trying to read those long numbers can create issues. So again, if something's moved, you can have problems there. Lay-down yard crew lacks this information about where is that material, and the length of time required to locate these items often requires a flagging step. And in many cases, with a system that you're using in a work process that you put into place that's being followed, you can sometimes eliminate that flagging step, which again reduces some labor on your project. Finally, with the issuing, typically what we see today is the visibility ends when the material is issued. If we go back to that overall supply chain, the supplier is very interested with getting the material to the site. And once it's at the site and they say it's been received, he's paid for it, he's happy, then the warehouses has custody of that material until they issue it to construction, and that's their job. They get it to construction, but the visibility for the warehouse typically ends there because their custody is done. That's given to construction. And so with having a paper-based or some of the status quo systems that are out there, there's not this visibility to see where is this material in the actual given status, which that in and of itself creates communication issues and problems that come from there. So what are some things that you can do about that? And talk a little about deployment planning and some of the best practices that are out there. I mean, one of the first things to just clearly state is that any solution that you look out to try to solve some of these problems is going to have basically 4 different components that are going to be to it. My second bullet there is there's no Walmart that exists in the EPC industry. Many people may be familiar with the history with RFID and how that came about, but really and truthfully on the RFID side, it really began to get some traction when Walmart began to state that they wanted their suppliers to use this. Now, they haven't gone as far with that as they had hoped, but it did spearhead a rush, if you will, among the RFID providers in the industry to create products that would be able to fill that need in that market. Well, to date, that hasn't happened with the EPC industry. There hasn't been, there's not any one player that's standing up and saying, hey, we're going to do this, and then everyone else is following suit. And that's because every project is different. Every organization is different. We see that on even working with the same EPC company, we can deploy it on 4 different projects, and it may be used differently on 4 different projects that are out there. So that's the first thing to realize. You're not going to be able to, just necessarily go and buy something off a shelf that's going to fit it. You're going to have someone to have not only whatever the hardware is that you're using to collect it, whether that's barcode, RFID, GPS only, whatever it is, you're going to have some software to communicate with that. And then you're going to need some services to help you get that up and running and to integrate that within your work processes to be able to. Some of the things that we have seen are you need to clearly define what materials are in scope when you look at doing a deployment, because this is going to feed everything else. Do you want to start with just your pipe spools? Do you want to do pipe spools and steel? Do you want to do everything mechanical, or do you want to do every single thing, in the warehouse and in the laydown yard? These are all decisions that you have to make, so that when you make those decisions, those are also going to drive the next biggest thing that's out there, is determining what is that master single data source for each of those components that you're looking for. Again, so we talked about in the beginning the fact that there are multiple suppliers, and in many cases, some of the larger systems or equipment suppliers will have sub-suppliers that are actually producing components of this overall, turbine or whatever it may be, that they're going to come directly from that sub-supplier. So where is that data coming from? Most of the time, all of this has been, there's some engineering system there's some design system, there's a model, that has been used to come up with these unique identification numbers that you're going to want to have in your system to be able to do that. So how are you going to get that? Are you going to get that through an Excel file, from different people, or are you going to get that from a system that you already have and you're going to integrate that with? Whatever it is, you need to document that plan. Write that plan down. Get people who are bought into that and who are going to actually be responsible for ensuring that your system, your barcode system, your RFID system, whatever that is going to have the data that it needs to be able to be valuable at the point of receipt, at the point of location, and the point of issue. There's a lot of different ways to do that. One of the cleanest ways to do it, if you can, is to integrate that with some of your other systems and maybe do a more automated data transfer. But those are things that you need to think about when you get into the planning of this. Are you going to have somebody manually updating this data, or are you going to actually do that through some type of integration? The other thing that you need to do, once you understand what material is in scope and you understand for that material where is the data about that material and how are you going to get that data into your tracking system, your management system, then you need to develop a work process flow diagram. And from those work process flow diagrams, you need to be able to define project-specific procedures. So when I say a work process flow, diagram, what I'm talking about is something that this is a little subset here of what that looks like. Obviously you can't see that, can't make sense, but every one of those comes to a process map reference that says this is what I'm going to do with the system, and I'm going to do it at this point, and it's either going to be what we call in a lot of cases happy path. This is if everything goes right, or what if something's wrong? What if it's if I'm at the point of receipt, if something's damaged, what do I want to do with it? Do I want to take a picture? Do I want to make some notes about it? What do I want to do there? But once you've done that, you need to take the process flows, convert that to your project-specific procedures, and then assign who, if you have the names for your specific project, that's great. Who's going to be responsible for making sure that these work processes are supported at each given step? So, what we see out there today is that, there's a lot of good written procedures, and those written procedures are typically based off of what's been done for many years, and it's been done to. There's a lot of things that are assumed as far as process steps that are going to be performed by the actual person there when they're doing that. So what you've got to be able to do, if you're going to use a system to do that, then you've got to be able to convert that into what am I going to do when I push this button, or what am I going to be able to do when I do this. So all of that is something that has to be really thoroughly thought through, converted procedures, so that people can follow those procedures. So again, when you get into tagging, again, do you want to use a barcode? Do you want to use RFID? Do you want to use different flavors of RFID? One of the main differences, especially when you're talking about tracking things in an outdoor location, is, how are you going to manage the GPS location of that? You can record a GPS location. Do you have control enough over the laydown yard? Do you have control enough over the people that are going to be using your mobile devices to enforce a procedure that says every time you touch that device, scan the barcode, or scan the RFID tag and record the GPS location? If you can do that, then that's fantastic. Because now what you've got is you've got your work processes that are being supported in an electronic fashion with a mobile device. But that process has to be audited, because in some cases we see there are instances where the laydown yard can become dynamic, and there may be not a loss of control, but there can be sometimes a slip of control. So maybe the construction guys maybe they get frustrated for whatever reason. They need to go get a specific spool, or need to go get a specific something out of the yard. If they go and get that and then it's not recorded that it's been moved, then you've lost visibility of where that material is. One way to get around that, one option, is what's called an active RFID. Active RFID allows you to do what's called an inventory sweep of the yards on a periodic basis, and then you can tell if it moved or not. Obviously, that comes with a cost, but that cost, for the right environment, is typically offset by the benefit of being able to actually know, hey, this did move from here to there, and I'm not going to have to spend, my guys are not going to spend hours out there looking for that material that actually is not in its originally recorded location. And I'm not going to actually re-procure something because I gave up after a day of looking for it. So those are things that you have to do, but that comes into, again, in the deployment planning, fully understanding, again, what is the material and scope, what is the data, where's the data about that material, what are the work processes that I can enforce and that I'm going to enforce, and can I audit and control that work process. Once you do that, then now you have the ability to determine, which of these do I want to use. So we've got a little table here that talks through, what are some of those differences. I mean, the active RFID, you can have a 100-meter read range, read that under snow, read that under ice. Again, it doesn't require a line of sight to do that, but you can see that the cost is higher than a passive RFID or even a ruggedized barcode that's out there. The least expensive, that's out there is a barcode label that can be printed. And, we actually have some people now that are able actually, as part of the receiving process, to print their own barcode. And their own barcode then can actually be used to track that material. Now, obviously, there are, when you begin into using barcode labels in an outdoor location, there's some things that you have to begin to think about there. How long is that material going to be out there? Is the label going to stay on? So there's certain things that you have to think about and you have to do. And you may get into a decision point to maybe use a more ruggedized barcode that can withstand some of those elements that you're going to see typically out in a laydown yard, and possibly use the ruggedized barcode over that. And then the passive RFID, you get a little more read range, in some cases 10 to 20 feet, some cases less, but you can't read that under snow. You can't read that under ice. It doesn't require a line of sight, but in some cases, if you're in a high metal environment, you may have to get closer to it to read it than you would with the active RFID. So what we see typically is, people will look at that and they'll determine, number one, is it going to move? If they think that it's not going to move and they can control the process, then they'll either go with a passive or a barcode. And the passive they would go with over a barcode because possibly they're concerned that the barcode may be scratched or that the barcode may not survive the heat or the moisture or things like that, and if it made a fade, those types of things. All of that is where the passive RFID would come over that because even if it fades or does anything like that, again, you can read it and you don't have to actually worry about anything being scratched on it. Again, so some things that you have to think about when you're doing the deployment planning. The other thing that you want to do when you're doing deployment planning on this is, regardless of whether you're using, an active, a passive, or a ruggedized barcode, you want to optimize that tag utilization. So what this, what you want to run is you want to run some models. You may work with your service provider to help you build a model like this to say, in this environment, I mean, we see, the engineering design may be 30% done, and then some of the material begins to show up. And so what that, all the material is not going to show up on day one, and it's not going to all be installed on day 10. There is somewhat of a curve there, and your curve may be further out to the right. It depends on your exact schedule, depends on a lot of different factors that go into it. But, in this example here, what we're looking at is a chart that tells, this blue section back here is telling me this is the sum of all of my other sections. And I can see that there's a peak period here. I can see that there's the time where I'm going to need more tags over that period to be able to track those items effectively. And that would be from receipt at site or, having it attached to the supplier to being received at site. to the point that it's actually, that tag is cut off and then disassociated with that material so that it can be reused. So that means, in most cases what we've seen is when they're about to fly the material up, or they're going to install that, the craft will cut that off and typically put them in a bucket or put them somewhere, and then at the end of the day or every couple of days they'll take those buckets up to the tool room, and then somebody at the tool room will take those tags, and then those tags would be cleaned and they would be disassociated from the material, and they're ready to be associated with that new material. So again, you want to optimize that. If you're tracking 85,000 pipes full, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need 85,000 tags day one. You may need considerably less than that. The other thing, when you get into tagging and you get into the supplier tagging it, pretty much everybody we talk to wants the supplier to put those tags on. And that makes sense, right? Because the supplier is there, they're doing their final inspection. At this point, they're actually going to be, they're the best person to put that tag on, because whoever's doing that inspection should know whatever that piece mark number is or that spool number is. But what you've got to do, and what we highly recommend, is if you're going to have the supplier put that on, then you need to establish that procedure up front within the contract. You, as the purchaser, have the most leverage, obviously, when you're taking bids and accepting bids. So that's the time to basically tell them, hey, we're going to provide you with the hardware, the software, and the hardware is typically a handheld device. We want to give you this, put it in your hands so that you can put the tag on, and we're going to expect you to have that correct, 99.99% of the time, or some percentage that you agree on. And then clearly state in that contract you're going to provide training on that, as well as a feedback mechanism for that supplier to be able to let you know if they're having some issues or they're having some concerns with that process. But you want to, number one, establish that up front with the supplier. If you don't establish that with a supplier and you don't have this process to go back in and do that, then self-tagging by far is going to provide you the most accurate tagging. And when I say tagging, it doesn't matter if it's an active, a passive, or a barcode. If someone is doing that at the point of receipt, the time that it takes from the time that you've offloaded that truck to the time that it's actually put in the warehouse or it's actually stored somewhere in a lay-down yard, you're talking about an additional maybe 2 minutes of your time to be able to do that, to know that you have the right piece, you've received the right piece, and that you're going to be able to identify that piece in an electronic fashion with a mobile device later down in your, your locating, your requesting, your locating, and your issuing process. So those are some things that you need to really think about when you get into the tagging, because not only is it important to identify what materials you're going to use and where is the data coming from for that material, and what is the work process that needs to be put into place to be able to ensure that we're maintaining the location of that material, but you need to be able to identify that material. And you need to be able to identify that material in an electronic fashion. So that means I need to be able to scan that barcode, I need to be able to scan that RFID tag, or I need to be able to, if nothing else, have that data available to the worker in the field on his mobile device, so that what he can do is he can actually select that, and that he can then do the different processes that he needs to be able to do on that. Well, one of the other key things that we've seen out there is you need a dedicated resource to work with all the stakeholders on a project. Again, with this industry, every project is different. All the suppliers can be different. The owner can be different. In many cases, there's a mashing up of work processes and emotions, and just making sure in the beginning that everybody is a well-oiled team to get this very complex construction job done. If you're going to implement a electronic materials management process, a mobile materials management process, And given that this is, in many cases, a somewhat of a paradigm shift for the people that are going to be using it in the field, you need to have a person that can be that champion there. And what we have seen work the best has been a young college graduate, typically somebody, we have a couple of guys that are doing this, they're just out of Georgia Tech, but they're young, they're eager, they know a little bit about construction, mostly things they've learned from their studies. Maybe they had a construction management degree, maybe they had some type of, maybe an engineering degree, but they want to learn about construction. They want to see this as a leadership potential because they're going to learn a lot. I mean, materials management, when somebody's in this position, they're going to learn a lot about the construction organization and how things work because, again, materials in many cases could be 50% of the total cost of a project. And so, being able to be in the middle of that with the people that are receiving it, supporting the people receiving it, supporting the people that are requesting it, that need to locate it, these guys are going to learn a lot about that process, and they're going to be able to interface not only with the suppliers you have, but the field engineers, the superintendents, project managers, as well as the guys in the laydown yard, as well as the warehouse, and to the point where you've even got the clerks they're going to be working with. So it's a real good learning experience for these guys, but you need to have somebody there that is a go-to person when somebody in the field has a question about that mobile device. And we're not suggesting that you need to go and hire someone specifically to do this. I mean, this can be, somebody, in many cases, this is somebody that's already, on your project staff that's out there. But it needs to be somebody that gets the technology, that is very comfortable with it, but also has the ability to, and the want to learn and to help the project utilize the tool. So, really quickly, I want to talk a little bit about who we are and about Jovix. I mean, Jovix is our system. It's named after Job Site Visibility Extension. It's really using mobile devices to provide this access to data, and that access to data is what should I be doing at the point of receipt, who has requested material, what material do I need to go and get for the day, where do I need to take that material, and then finally, what is the status of that material? Has it been installed? Has it been inspected? Has it gone through paint? Has it been fabricated? Being able to keep up with material at all these different locations, and then feed that data back. There are a lot of good systems that are out there that people are using. We've integrated with a lot of them, whether that's your procurement systems that you have, whether that's some type of modeling system. But you want to be able to get data from those systems, make that data available to the workers in the field on a mobile device, and then you want the transactions that have occurred with the workers in the field on the mobile device to be made available back to your existing system, so that your existing work processes can be augmented rather than interrupted. And so that's kind of what we're doing. I mean, I think we talked a little bit about it in the beginning, but I mean, we feel we are the world's leading resource on mobile materials management, and being able to extend your data to the field and then be able to take the data that's captured at the point of transaction, whether that's a receipt, whether that's an inspection, whether that, whatever it may be, out there in the field to your back-end systems, so that we can then streamline those processes. Again, we're working with a lot of the larger EPC firms out there, some owner-operators as well. We've deployed this now many different times, deployed in 6 different countries, 4 different continents. Some of the people that we're working with out there today. And the nice thing about this system that I can say is that everything that came into this system came from mind share and came from requirements from some of these players. So that things that are in there are not something that we as a company, as a software company, dreamed up. These are real-world business problems in the receipt and the storing and the locating and the issuing of that material on your large and complex job sites. From a deployment methodology, we really start with a crawl, walk, run. Crawl is really talking about, let's do a planning workshop. There's still a lot of questions that are going to be out there on what is RFID, how do I use a barcode. There's a lot of misconceptions that are out there. So in a planning workshop, what you can do is you can sit down and you can understand, what are the workflow processes that you want to support. Again, where is that data coming from? Do you have to integrate with the other systems? Again, what is the material you're going to track? What is my strategy for tagging the material? Am I going to have, for this type of material, the supplier is going to do it? Are we far enough along, or we still have enough time to get that into the contract? Or am I going to tag certain items, or I'm going to print a barcode label and put a barcode label on certain items at the point of receipt? Come up with a strategy on that so that so that you can come up with a scope of work. What do I need from hardware, software, services? Another big one is, what's my return on investment model? Through our deployments now, we have seen a couple of different ways that you can justify using the different systems. And so that's one of the things to help out with, is not only looking at the cost of the system, but also looking at what do you believe the benefits are going to be of the system. Because ultimately you're going to have to sell this to either your upper management, you may have to sell it to the owner-operator, and being able to have this justification that's backed up by some real-world deployments is very valuable to have. And then a deployment schedule. Having a very detailed schedule that says, when are we going to start, what has to happen first, what are my responsibilities as a contractor or an owner-operator, and what is the service provider going to be providing out of me. Once you do that and you have your first project, what we've seen is that, with many of these larger EPCs now, we're on our fourth project with them or our third project with them. We're very quickly maybe going to be on a seventh project with them. So, there's, how can I take it from a one-off project to something that can be adopted by other projects? And that's difficult because, as we talked about earlier, even within your organization, one project may operate differently from another project. But I firmly believe that once these projects, we've seen it, once some of these projects begin to have success, then that success is, that information travels fast. And the other projects will want to adopt a very similar process. They may do things a little bit differently, but it would still be very similar in the core receipt, storing, requesting, and then issuing it, locating it and issuing it to the construction. So I'd really like to open it up to some questions that you guys have. I've been kind of rambling here for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So I don't know, Nicole, if there's any questions out there.
There sure are. So this would be a good opportunity. If you do have some questions, just type them in and under the questions tab here on the toolbar, and I'll get started in fielding some of these to John. Can you discuss a little bit about pricing around active RFID tags? I'm assuming that's kind of in relation to passive RFID tags. We've heard the prices coming down. What can people expect to pay for tags nowadays?
Sure, absolutely. So when you want to look at the different scale that we have there, the active RFID tags that are for this market that have been deployed, those are typically in the mid-$20 range. The other way that we've been able to alleviate some of that expense for our customers is offering a rental option. In other words, you may, again, back to that slide where we had the peak period, you may want to actually rent some tags for that peak period. So rather than paying the mid-20s for a tag, you may only need to use it for 6 months. Well, then you just rent that for, say, $1 a month. So it drastically reduces your cost there. Plus, you don't own a capital asset that you need to keep up with afterwards. Now, in relation to a passive tag, ranges in form factor, and what I mean by that is it a very rugged tag? or can it be literally just kind of a label? Those are going to range anywhere from less than $1, in some cases up to $5. But it all depends on the form factor of the tag, and it also depends on the actual volume that you purchased it at. So in general, we typically see what people, it's typically around $3 for a passive RFID tag.
Thank you. Does Atlas lease the hardware and software on a project-by-project basis?
Yes, that is an option that we offer. We call it our rental program, and you actually can rent everything. You can rent everything for one flat monthly fee.
Okay, thanks. Are the systems integrated with EAM environments, such as create work orders, maintenance requests, etc., like Maximo from IBM?
Yeah, without a doubt, you definitely can do that. What we have is what we call an API. It stands for Application Program Interface. And what that allows us to do is to interface with different systems that are out there. And what we have found in many cases, we're actually an Intergraph Smart Plant Alliance partner, so we're able to integrate with Smart Plant Materials. Again, they have an API, we have an API, and then also in many cases what we have found is that you can use a batch processing at the database layer. So that we can, in many cases, at the end of the day, or in some cases, some people have done it literally, every 3 hours, have the data from our application update into the other database application.
Thanks. For warehousing, should I use barcodes or RFID tags? How do I decide? Yeah,
I mean, typically for warehousing, what we've seen are barcodes are more than adequate. Inside a warehouse, you've got a controlled environment in most cases. You're going to have to touch that material when it's being pulled or when it's being put away. And so using, a barcode label at that point has typically been the most economical way to go ahead and identify that material. And where you get into some questions, or when you get into outdoors, how long it's going to be stored outdoors, you may even start off by printing a label at the point of receipt to be able to do that. But you may want to, when you're going to actually lay it down outside, at that point, you might want to consider associating a RFID tag or a rugged barcode at that point, which is a very simple process to do. I mean, you just scan one barcode, scan another barcode. And those two things are associated in the system, and then that's what allows you to track that in a more harsh environment.
Similar note, how do you protect tags through the fabrication, paint, galvanizing process?
Right. Well,
John? Hello, John? John, did we lose you? John? John?
Hey, Nicole.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know what happened, man. My phone just kicked me off. I'm sorry.
No problem. The question was around tags and how you protect them during painting and fabrication and galvanizing.
Sure.
Like.
Galvanizing, I don't have a tag right now that'll survive galvanizing. In many cases, painting as well. Now, that's where passive is a good choice for when you get into a painting application, because I mean you can still read that through whether it's got paint on it or not. Galvanizing, I mean, you have to be able to enforce a process. If you're going to put the tag on before it's galvanized, you're going to have that galvanizer take that tag off and put the tag back on. And there's some novel ways that you can help them ensure they get the right tag back on, which involve typically using some type of stainless tag as well that goes with that so they can match them up at the end. But galvanizing is a wrinkle there that you have to really address and work with your galvanizer or your fabricator to be able to do that.
Okay, do you run into obstacles with the construction project managers being risk adverse and not wanting to embrace this technology? And if so, how do you overcome it?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, this is a new way to do things, and it's not a new way to do things for the world as a whole. I mean, you know, the other industries have been doing it for a long time. The one of the ways that, you know, we have found, and every construction manager is a little bit different, but at the end of the day, that construction manager, the one thing that he's concerned with relative to materials is that that material is available to his crew, to his superintendents when they need it to be able to install it. So, you know, one of the things that we do personally is, you know, if we get into a situation where we've got a construction manager that either doesn't believe this is going to help them or just can't see past that, what we will do is we will put them in contact with other construction managers, you know, that we're working with today. And we'll broker that conversation, and we'll let those guys have their own conversations. And in many cases, we found that is very, very helpful for them to be able to talk to one of their peers that's actually done it before.
Great. We have lots of questions coming in. Great. Do you have any small, medium commercial project case studies in the 30 to 40 million cost volume? We operate as a GCCM, and most of our work is subcontracted. Materials management is usually the subcontractor's responsibility with limited input from the GC. So I guess the question is, does this work when you're dealing with subs and GCs, and have you, in fact, had use cases where you've worked under those scenarios?
Right. Actually, we have not had a project where on that scale where it's 30 to 40 million. Typically, the projects have been larger. You know, we're implementing right now some new functionality that's targeting exactly that market set. We have some people here that are located in Birmingham, Alabama, where we are, that we're hoping to be able to trial some of that with. But you know, it comes down to who receives the material, who has control of that material. In many cases, you know, those people need to be, they're going to be the benefit of that, right? Whoever controls that material, whoever issues that to construction, they're the people that are need to be bought into the system and to be able to use the system.
Okay, so then we have a few questions kind of along this thread as well. Currently, what is the size in dollars of the project where these systems make the most sense to deploy?
Sure.
And have you deployed these systems for building construction?
Commercial construction? Yeah, you know, we today most of what we've deployed has been for industrial, and it's been for more of you know, where you've got structural steel. They're all pre-engineered, pipe spools, valves, fittings, you know, the whole shebang there. The commercial, I do believe there is value to do that. You know, and that's exactly the market that I was kind of alluding to that we're going after next. Is to be able to do that. There's different, and we're trying to. You know, I'm open to anyone that's on this call. You know, call me, let me know. I mean, we're trying to understand, you know, that market as well as we understand the EPC market. You know, there's different things, right? I mean, there's material that has to be received and all that good stuff. So it's very similar, but I think the value created by a system like this could be different for a smaller commercial project.
Okay. Have you seen passive tags used for a storage area sweep?
Well, here's what we've done. We've had one project where they put passive tags on items that were in an indoor location. And we know what tags are supposed to be in there, and we can do an inventory cycle count to be able to tell you we either saw that tag or we didn't see that, or I say saw. We either read that tag with a reader or we didn't read that tag with a reader. Now, in an outdoor environment, no, I have not seen that done successfully. I've not seen anybody do an actual sweep. And there's reasons for that. I mean, so one of the reasons is when we're able to do that with an active RFID tag, we're able to use some different software algorithms that are based on what's called a known signal strength to distance table, okay? So that's a known thing that's been used as an input to the algorithm, and then when we're walking around, we're getting this different signal strength as well as different GPS locations, and we're able to predictably tell you where is that item. Has it moved from its original location? Is it in this new location? When you get into passive RFID, there are so many different factors, again, because the passive RFID it doesn't have a battery, so it's not beaconing out a signal. It's waiting for this reader to come in range of it so it can absorb the energy from it and then spit that signal back. So just by the nature of that, the physics of that, that signal strength is always going to be different. It's never going to be the same. So it's virtually, I'm not going to say impossible, but right now I don't know anyone that's been able to build a reliable passive RFID distance to signal strength to distance table. And until that's been able to done, being able to do a sweep may be difficult.
Thanks. What are the pros and cons of pre-assigned specific barcodes and printing generic barcodes than scanning them in?
Well, I'm not sure if I completely understand that question, but so I mean, one of the things that when a barcode is a barcode is a barcode, right? What makes it important is that that barcode is related back to the information about your material. And so, for example, so if you have a supplier that's already applying a barcode to an item, that's fantastic. But when you scan that barcode, you're going to get some number back or some series of characters back in your database, okay, in the mobile device that you're scanning. In that database, that it already needs to know what that barcode represents, so that when I scan that, I know that I'm scanning this spool, or I know that I'm scanning this valve, or whatever it may be, this piece of equipment. And that can be done by a data exchange between you and your system and that supplier. But if you don't have that luxury, if you don't have the ability to do that, then what you're going to need to do in many cases is create your own barcode, because now that barcode has been created from your system and it ties back to that material, and that's what you're going to use from that point. So that at the point of receipt, you know, you either have already done some homework and you already have gotten the data in the system from the supplier so that when you scan that barcode, you know what that is, or you simply enforce a process to where you print your own barcode at that point and apply it, and then that's what you track to for the life of it during your site materials management processes.
Thank you. How about, does the system integrate with customs infrastructure type systems, such as shipping terminals, local custom authorities, et cetera?
Yeah, the answer to that, I mean, in general, is that, again, with the API that we have, we feel like there's really not a system out there that we can't integrate with. Most of the systems that are out there are going to be able to produce this XML file, which is I know Fiatech's doing some work there, and you know, with doing some different formattings. We're involved with Fiatech as far as Element 3 and Element 4, along with the guys at Pan Projects and HAL, and being able to take the different data in and different data out. So, I haven't come across a system yet that we couldn't integrate with.
Okay, what is the life expectancy of an RFID tag if it's left in a permanent location, and then specifically a hot location? Let's say Houston.
Okay.
Houston in July. Yeah.
Yeah. So the good news about the RFID tags is, again, there's so many different flavors that are out there. You know, if you look at an active RFID tag, you've got a 5-year battery life on that active RFID tag. So for a permanent tag, that's not a real good option unless you're going to, enforce the process as the owner-operator that you're going to go and you're going to replace those every 5 years. But what we've seen more of is that, even if they use an active RFID tag for the tracking, what they'll do before the point of installation is they'll take that and then disassociate the active tag and associate a passive tag to it. And when you get into the passive tag, those passive tags, some of those tags are rated up to 400, 500 degrees as far as the heat is concerned, as well as on the other side, as far as going very, very, very cold. And the life of a passive tag theoretically is forever. I'm sure at some point after we're all long gone, I mean they may not, they may degrade to some point, but there's no moving parts, so to speak, in there. There's a chip and there's an antenna, and that's it. So the passive is a better option for a long-term identification process.
Okay, can you speak a little bit to the typical project scope, which I guess you did a little bit of, as well as if you've used active RFID in operations and maintenance to read equipment performance?
So there are two questions there. One is the typical project scope, and the other one is have we using active for operation and maintenance. Is that right?
Yeah, for evaluating equipment performance. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so you can use an active RFID to be able to do that and read that from a long range. Performance, typically is engine runtime. There's also temperature that you can measure, and you can also measure moisture. Those are typically some of the things that you can do with the active RFID tag as far as the equipment is concerned. And as far as a typical project scope, again, going back to one of the first things we said is every project is different. I mean, it's going to be completely dependent on the number of items you're tracking, when you're receiving them, when you're installing them, what's your install rate. There's just a lot of factors that go into that, which is why that planning workshop is typically required to come up with that typical scope.
What phase of an EPC project does the decision to use RFID or barcoding need to be made?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing, the best time to make that decision is when you are doing your planning for, well, ultimately, if you can do it in your bidding process, right? I mean, if you can include in your bid, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to manage our materials on this project, and we're going to use this system, and we're going to use this technology, and then you put that as part of your bid package, that's obviously the best time to do it. From a planning perspective, if you haven't done that, then you want to, again, determine what is the material that's in scope. What are you going to track? Is it spools? Is it steel? That's going to drive when you're actually going to be letting those bids or those RFQs out there for when the material is going to be, if it's steel or equipment or whatever it may be. At that point is when you want to be thinking about, am I going to use it? Because you need to make a decision. Do I want the supplier to put the tag on, or am I going to put the tag on? If you want the supplier to put the tag on, then you need to go ahead and put that into your contract language to be able to do that. So first is determine for your project, when you're awarded the project, what are you going to actually track? How are you going to do your materials management for that? That is the time to be thinking about, am I going to use a system like this?
Okay, and we are just about out of time, so this is one person asking 3 questions, so I'm going to summarize it into one and then close this out. Can you mix and match the types of tags? I think this came in earlier. I think you've answered that as yes, but I'll let you answer. How do you quantify savings for calculating ROI? And are you using 2D or 3D or both in barcodes?
Okay, the answer to that is, the first question is yes, you can use a mix, and every project we've had to date has used a mix. So that's part of the tagging strategy that we talk about. What are you going to use it on? What makes sense for you? The second one on ROI and the calculation of that, there's different ROI models that we have. I can't really do justice to that in 1 minute here, but if somebody's interested, we're certainly happy to talk to them and explain how we've done that with all our other customers. And third, the 2D, yes, we're definitely using 2D. We're using 2D as well as the 1D barcodes.
All right, John, thank you so much. Great input, too, from our attendees, and a great way to kick off the 2012 season here. I just want to remind everybody that Fiatech's annual conference is coming up soon. Just a couple of months out, we're going to be at Marriott Doral for all you golfers in Miami, right near the airport, April 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Registration's up. You can go to our website at fiatech.org. Keynote speakers have already been confirmed, and the program is in its final stages of being finalized. So we've got exhibit sponsorships, registration, all of it's open, and I encourage you to take a look and come join us in Miami this April. And again, just want to give a big thanks to John, and hope all of you have a great day, and check our website at the end of the week for a recording of this presentation.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.